Like, we should record. We are recording. I'm just a nerd. Right, we're live. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today, we're going to solve some problems. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
You know what? On this podcast, it's so funny how we just chase certain sort of like trends. Do you know what I mean? Like there was that while where it just felt like all we were doing is doing movies, right? And then we were just like making episodes upon episodes about like League and like
And then
WoW stuff.
when it's high WoW season, it's like a WoW
We are
cast.
now following the most insane, I guess, number of just things happening in our personal lives. We're now following some I guess it would be three sort of live game maybe like things, one of which came out of this podcast that you showed me, one of which came out of us playing D&D on Monday, and one of which came out of me playing Warhammer yesterday, which is just like a lot of stuff happening all at once.
Yeah, and so we're going to start out with the magic thing, right? So just for the people at home, so you know, give credit. These guys are called Distraction Makers. It's, I believe, the one guy is a board game designer, and the other guy, I think, is like an artist at Blizzard, or at least was at one point. Their name cards popped up at one point, and it said like artist at Blizzard, but you know, I don't remember when that video is from, so I don't know if it's still the case. But they talk about game mechanics and their magic stuff. I think got the most traction, so I think they mostly talk about Magic the Gathering, and other kind of like board games and like collectible card games in that vein. But relatively recently, they've been talking about Commander stuff, both before and post the bracket things, and they are dealing with, I would say, kind of what I at least am led to believe is kind of the typical playing with randos Commander experience, which is it's really hard to match decks in a way that makes sure that everybody's having fun, and they offer some solutions. I also had some solutions about how to solve this, some of these problems. I know you had some visceral reactions. I know you had a lot of like specific thoughts. Do you want to kick it off?
So they brought up a couple of things that I never really thought about before. But the most visceral one, the one that I think is most interesting, is I think are thinking on a sort of like a ludic level, on like a competitive side of things. And to them, they outline this problem that to me is Commander's biggest asset, right? They kind of say, you know what, 1v1 Magic is pretty good because of this thing, but Commander is actually pretty bad because of this other thing. And I flip those. I think 1v1 Magic is bad and Commander is good, and it is specifically the introduction of the 4-player free-for-all environment, and what they call king making, that it is a game about king making. They describe this as a problem, and I totally understand the reasoning. They describe this as a problem for a very simple reason. In a lot of Commander games, it becomes quite clear that someone is going to win at the expense of everybody else, and what you have sort of, or not at the expense of everybody else, but that you are not necessarily going to win the game, but that you can push your resources in a certain direction in order to determine the winner, right? So you can imagine a scenario, you're sitting around the table, there's, player A, B, C, D, right? Players A and B have rocketed ahead, they have really good starts, they're really powerful, and you are player C, and you have a lot of interaction in your hand, and you have to choose targets for it. What do? Well, do you blast the shit out of player B and let player A run kind of roughshod over the board, or do you blast the shit out of player A and let player B run roughshod over the board, basically, right? If we were to look at this from like a purely ludic sense, right? And let's say that happens. Let's say you blast player A, player B wins, right? The key decision that got made during that game is the decision by player C to target player A. So the game-winning play was not from player B, who is the person who ended up winning the game. It was from player C. This is bad in their sort of estimation, because theoretically the game-winning play ought to come from kind of player B, essentially, right? If someone wins the game, they ought to be making sort of game-winning plays, or not quite game-winning plays, game-winning decisions. It's really about the word decision rather than play, right? And the fact that player B is not making game-winning decisions and player C is a bad problem for that Commander has a hard time solving, right? In my mind, this describes all of the politics that I think makes Commander so interesting. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I would say, I just want to throw on top of this. I think part of their point there is not that it's necessarily inherently bad. They talk a lot about how Root kind of has king making as part of its design. And part of the problems they see with Commander is that the game was designed as a 1v1 game, and so it doesn't necessarily have things in place to account for this king making behavior, right? And to make it work. And also there's like kind of like a feels bad moment of like king making can feel arbitrary, right? Like you kind of rob the victor of their win, and you kind of like, you didn't win because you were better. You won because somebody was pulling for you or something, right? Like, and that doesn't necessarily feel good if the game isn't designed to set up for it. And the game also kind of naturally pushes people into king making positions because of kind of the nature of the game, and like, the fact that like most things are designed, because it's a one-on-one game, things are generally designed to target one other player. And this has downstream effects where like multiplayer target cards become insanely good in Commander that aren't necessarily as good in classic traditional Magic, because essentially you multiply the power of any card by 3 if it can affect three other people instead of just 1.
Yeah, the simple version of this, there's a card called Siphon Mind. Siphon Mind is 3 and a black. It says each opponent discards a card, and you draw a card for each opponent who discarded a card this way, right? And so basically that card scales in its effectiveness based on the number of opponents you have. In a 1v1 match, it's pretty bad. It is 4 mana to force your opponent to discard 1 and for you to draw 1. But actually in Commander, it's pretty good. It's 4 mana for you to force a card out of all 3 of your opponent's hands and for you to draw 3, right? And those are the effects that they're talking about when it comes to kind of like this asymmetry.
Yeah. There was another aspect to this that I am blanking on for a second.
I actually think there's a lot of it. So in my mind, this is sort of like a seed that has a tree with a ton of different branches. There's a lot of different ways to go, and they go a bunch of different places. But just to answer kind of the first thing, this was what bothered me so much. I described this to Mego as like a podcast that felt like the Bizarro version almost of this podcast, right? I felt like I was listening to someone making arguments to the sort of same, I don't want to say extent, but in the same way that I would make arguments, right? And wanting so badly to get in there and disagree because like it's so close to right that it's wrong. And that like closeness is sort of what bothers me. This is a little different because I kind of take a pretty orthogonal view. In my mind, king making is what makes this good, right? In typical 1v1 Magic, so there's 2 problems they're doing. Number 1, they're kind of assuming out the agency of active players making proactive plays, because I actually do think that there is quite a lot of agency assigned with that, right? So in the scenario that I gave before, player B wasn't making game-winning decisions, player C was. But I don't actually think that's true. Player B makes game-winning decisions by establishing a game-winning board presence, right? Player B has the option to hold cards in hand, to play around board wipes, right? To try and keep their threat profile as low as possible, but they are making plays that commit them to the board, make them a threat, and put them in a game-winning sort of position, right? Those are active decisions, and those are game-winning decisions, right? I would agree with the notion that the sort of agency or like key decision-making maybe rested with player C instead of with player B, and maybe there's a kind of a thing to parse there, but like the idea that player B did not have agency in that process is wrong. And it's something that happens quite often in sort of Magic in the way that we talk about kind of Commander. And I actually think is more of a comment on Commander's metagame than anything else. One of the things I feel about Commander these days is that the presence of board wipes, mass removal is quite low compared to what it was even 6 or 7 years ago, right? When I was playing a lot of Commander, I built a lot of my most recent Commander decks, like Eureka. That was just like 2018. That era had real board wipes happening pretty common. There were just lots more of them in players' decks, and so player B is much more likely to get hosed by a Wrath of God. If you commit your whole hand to the board and then someone plays Wrath of God and you lose because now all of your creatures are gone and you just have nothing to recover a board state. I mean, that describes so many Commander games I've played in, but it doesn't describe a lot of recent Commander games that I played in. And that's because most interaction these days is targeted rather than mass, essentially. And so I partially think that's kind of like a metagame. So I partially think that this is an agency problem, not quite representing the agency of the active player. It's partially a metagame problem of not quite respecting the nature of mass removal in the format and how it has decreased quite a lot. And I would say probably the last 5 years. And then the final piece that I kind of feel like makes this sort of wrong is the longevity of the format, which is maybe something that doesn't matter for most people, but I actually kind of think it underlies quite a lot of how Commander tends to play, which is that games are about more than themselves. So an interesting version of this is it's very common in Commander to make deals, right? Player A and player C will talk to each other and they'll go, hey, I will destroy this thing if you promise not to attack me next turn. And they go, okay, sure. Or like you make a deal and you say, I will pledge to not block. I will not block if you want to attack me and trigger this effect that you want in exchange for you doing something that I want down the line. Like that kind of thing. These kind of deals get made all the time. Deals are representative not of a game sort of insular sort of mechanic to Commander. They are actually representative of a game spanning mechanic to Commander, which is reputational, right? When you sit down at a board with someone who you made a deal with and they broke that deal, you never make a deal with that player ever again because they cannot be trusted, right? And even in the scenario where you're sitting down with locals at an LGS, I would even probably say that stuff still applies because you still give people kind of the benefit of the doubt and they can still lose it. And presumably your LGS, it's not like people go to an LGS Commander night once ever and then never ever go again, right? Like the idea is that you're going to be going back, you're going to develop a repertoire, all of this other kind of stuff. All of that reputational stuff is material game mechanic stuff. Like this is not outside of the game of Commander, in my opinion. This is part and parcel with the game of Commander because deals happen and because they materially impact the nature of the game. That element makes king making I want to almost say meta progression or something like that, which is to say, like, it's common for they were describing this thing on the podcast about how, like, oh, I'm playing with friends and one of them attacks me because they know I won't get salty about it or whatever. Well, that's a part of the politics that is part and parcel with Commander in my estimation. And part of king making is having a good reputation among your play group so that players are willing to king make you and help you win the game, essentially.
Sure, but
so, yeah.
I get that, but I think some of that too is also just kind of like, because the game isn't like, you have to establish those norms. And I think that's like part of their most valid point there, right? It's like, because there's no like official set of norms, it's hard to kind of build those on the fly, and you always run the risk of, like aggravating someone and making someone have a bad time because your norms are misaligned, right? Like, and I think that, I was thinking back actually to our own experience on this, and the saltiest I have ever been playing a game of Commander was at PAX, that time that Josh, screwed up my game plan. And I was mad because we were playing like this 5-star format where the two people beside you are your allies and the two people across from you are your enemies.
Oh my God, what a great format.
No, and I think actually for like the problems that they describe about, like, having a big bat or whatever, or like, like trying to focus the game in a way that it's not necessarily like, when I think for 5-player games, the star form, it's actually very good because, your main focus is two people across the table. The reason I was salty is, in my mind, us being allies meant we were like spiritually allies, not just kind of like, mechanically allies, right?
Yeah,
and of course, in retrospect, it makes sense that like Josh is actually trying to win. Sometimes that means using effects that can target me because they don't have like an enemy designation. And, even though he is rhetorically my ally, he is not necessarily, truly my ally, right? But I was salty because I was like, no, we're allies. Why are you doing this to me? And so like, I think that kind of experience isn't that uncommon, especially around this kind of balancing act about what is fair in Commander, what is, what is allowed. They make this point that like in one of their videos that like CEDH is actually probably one of the chiller forms of Commander because no one expects you to like be holding back in any way, shape, or form, right? Like you are ripping as hard as you can because that's the game, right? It's only in these kind of like, it's this kind of like broader thing that for card games, Rule 0 is like not a real answer, right? Because like that requires, social navigation of a space and like being able to delineate things in a way that isn't necessarily available to or visible to everyone, and also in a situation where maybe they're not comfortable doing that, right? Like, not to shit anyone in particular in our play group, but we had a game recently where one of the players was being a little salty, and I know that I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to be particularly aggressive towards this person because it's not worth the social opprobrium to kind of like, tick him off anymore, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to, and that player won the game because I think all three of us ended up making that similar decision, right? Like, it was you, me, and Josh, and we play a lot of Commander all the time, and so there is a certain social sort of recognition, or like you can imagine something like with like Rachel or somebody who doesn't play all that often, right? Like if we sat down to shuffle up a game of Commander and Ceran is using one of my loner decks, he gets a certain amount of a pass from that a lot of the time, right? Like you and I are going to go hard at each other, and that's pretty expected, right? But he's not necessarily going to take a hit on it. I do want to just mention for the record that Star, what a beautiful format. Oh my God. I actually think Commander would be fundamentally a better game if everybody played Star. If you went from 4-player free-for-all pods to 5-player Star pods, and I think it would just solve so many issues with Commander. Stuff like Rhystic Study would be less good because it's only triggering off of 2 players, not off of 3. You would also solve a number of like complications. So one of the things that can happen in Commander that Star actually solves, because as you scale up the number of players, you scale up threat assessment in a pretty kind of bad way. The game becomes less and less about the board typically, because when the time between your next turn, basically what can happen is you establish a board, the next player attacks into it, you lose a bunch of blockers. The next player attacks into it, you lose even more blockers. The last player attacks into it and you lose, right? If you get targeted 3 times like that, you can just lose. And if you're playing in an 8-player game or something like that, the amount of time between turn 1 and turn 2 for you is so long that at any individual point, you can just lose the game by being kind of focus fired out. This is ironically a StarCraft, or a problem I learned through StarCraft. But Star gets rid of that because Star reduces kind of your incoming attacks.
And it reduces your threat surface effectively.
Exactly.
And just to call it out, Jackie Chan Opera Singer was asking about the particulars. It's like, it's not you, Jackie Chan Opera Singer. Do not worry.
I love how you said, that one. Again, we're not trying to call it. It is kind of super interesting. They did bring up something that I think is really compelling around CEDH, which is the collusion problem. Like, how do you police out collusion? I actually thought that there was a whole podcast about that, and the discussion around it was insanely cool. Just because it's not something I think about. I don't like CEDH, and I think I would probably say it's a bad format if I were.
I don't think it's a bad format. I think it's actually probably the purest expression of like Commander as like a competitive game, and I think it's fine for people
Sure.
who want that. I can recognize that's not the type of game I want to play, because a lot of my enjoyment out of Magic comes from building, weird decks. And by definition, if the weird deck was going to be successful in CEDH, it wouldn't be a weird deck; it'd be a core deck, right? Like,
Yeah.
like one of the saddest things in the world to me is that like Thassa's Oracle is a staple, because building a weird Thassa's Oracle deck is a thing that I would love to do, or like a thing that I would love to do theoretically in a world where it wasn't like, the main strategy in CEDH at this point, right? Like the fact that it's popular means I'm no longer interested in it, which probably says something about
just
me.
define some terms. Thassa's Oracle is probably how 80% of CEDH decks win. It basically, when Thassa's Oracle comes into play, it checks the number of cards that are in your library, and if that number is essentially less than 2, you win the game. So there are a number of different kind of instant speed combo wins you can pull off with Thassa's Oracle. This is why I think it's a bad point. Like, to me, CEDH is bad in the same way that, like, the LCS, but for Mario Kart would be bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you turned Mario Kart into a hardcore esport, you could, I guess, like, I'm sure that would be possible. Maybe it is even out there, and I just don't pay any attention to it. But the point of Mario Kart is to be a party, co-op, couch co-op kind of party game, right? It is not to be a super hardcore competitive sort of experience. And I would say that if somebody is taking if somebody is playing competitive Mario Kart, they are probably just sort of reading the wrong. They're just like playing the game wrong. You know what I mean? Commander is supposed to not be that.
So there's a couple things I want to dive into here. First, though,
okay, sure.
I want to say to Jackie Chan, opera singer, to Josh, I apologize to the board for blowing up the board with my red tyranid. You shouldn't. I was just explaining like why I was salty at the moment. But to get back to this is interesting because one, it's a very interesting thing there about Super Smash Brothers, right? Like
interesting.
True. Like what's I cannot remember the name of the director off the top of my head, but famously hates that it's got a competitive scene and like the fourth Smash had tripping to try and like stop people from playing it competitively. But the thing that I think is interesting is that
about tripping. I think it was Brawl. Super Smash
Brothers it was Brawl.
Had tripping,
The thing about Mario Kart that I think is interesting, and the thing that I think is interesting about Commander, which is the thing that the distraction makers talk about, is that if there was a super competitive Sakurai, yes, there was a super competitive Mario Kart like circuit, right? The mechanics of Mario Kart would warp how you play that game. Like my guess is that you would want to be in like third place until like the final stretch of the game. That way you could have like a good item and like boost ahead. And so you'd have this weird pattern where players were trying to drop behind each other, right? To get like better item boxes, that kind of thing. And that's the thing that they describe as happening with CEDH that's weird, is that the play pattern now is essentially like build up, right? Have the Thassa's Oracle combo in your hand and either have a piece of it that you don't actually need, or like a piece that can retrieve a piece for you that you don't actually need and play it as a way to try and draw out reactions, or wait for somebody else to try and play the combo so that all of the interaction gets burned on them, all the counters get burned, and then you play. And that warping effect is what has driven all of this into this kind of Thassa's Oracle corner, because it's like a self-executing kind of, like you said, instant speed win. That can only be defeated by like counterspelling stuff. And that's what drives the meta in this direction. That's what makes it like not such a good thing. And I don't think that's the fault of CEDH. Like I said, I think the people who enjoy CEDH are probably having the best time or the most consistently good time out of people playing Commander, because they don't have to worry about any of this, bracket, my deck's a 7, rule 0 stuff, right? Like I mean, I would disagree with that. I think
it's hard to conceptualize this without sounding like a huge dick. So I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm just
Go
gonna
for
sound
it.
like a fucking asshole. Okay. I think they're playing a worse version of the game, and that the enjoyment that I get out of winning off of, you know, some stupid bullshit, or like the enjoyment that like Josh gets out of setting up a cool combo engine, or like playing Possibility Storm. Are you telling me that game where you played Possibility Storm, somebody playing fucking CEDH gets more enjoyment? I just think the answer to that is no.
So
Like,
I'm not saying that they get more like total satisfaction. I think they get more consistent satisfaction, right? Because you know who had a bad time when I played Possibility Storm? Our friend Jackie Chan Offersinger, right? Like, you know, and I kind of feel bad because, like, you know, his entire gameplay fell apart because he couldn't do anything, right? Like, you know,
I don't know, man. Okay, I bet that to me is all variance. I like
that is my point, right? CEDH doesn't have that variance, right? Like it because
I actually think it does, right? Like I think CEDH is probably full of games where you get salty because you had the combo interaction and you got baited by the demonic tutor, and then you fucking pass because somebody bluffs you. It's like that sucks. I bet those people have a terrible time, and I just like don't believe. Like I don't know. I just like don't believe that doesn't happen on a competitive level, even if like the understanding is like a little bit better. I don't know. I really the point I'm trying to make is I think the highs are lower even if the lows are lower. I don't think that anybody gets as hyped for plays in CEDH as you do when you build a janky deck with a pretty cool sort of engine to it, and that engine comes online. Yeah, this feels so good.
Okay.
Even just like playing Feather, right? Playing Feather with Smothering Tithe, with a deck on the board that doesn't care how many times it draws and never pays the 1 or 2 or whatever it is, like that felt great. And I just don't think that kind of thing is possible in CEDH typically.
I think that's fair. But we did name this episode Problem Solvers, and I do want to, like, you know, I think Star is a great solution for a lot of these problems, right? One of the suggestion that they put out is like somehow like, you know, have the Monarch mechanic be on by default in Commander. I thought that was an interesting way to solve the problem. Did you have any thoughts on that? Like, you know, essentially,
I love that idea. The Monarch. So just to explain, the Monarch is a mechanic that says somebody is the Monarch, and whenever somebody deals combat damage to that player, somebody is the Monarch. At the end of that player's turn, they draw a card. When somebody deals combat damage to the Monarch, they become the Monarch. So it incentivizes this. It sort of typifies the kind of the king making, but it has a lot of really interesting interactions. First of all, it is interactable with game pieces. There are game pieces that make you the Monarch or care about you being the Monarch. Secondly, it interacts with board states. This is the big thing that I think makes the Monarch a great mechanic. It makes people want to have creatures that attack. Like, I think this is probably one of the biggest problems about Commander, and any format that sort of looks like it. CEDH is not a format about creatures, right? Or if it is, it's a format about Thassa's Oracle, you know? Mostly what's kind of happening when you scale up deck sizes, like variability, health pools, right? The ability for someone to lay a bunch of creatures on the board that deal 120 points to 3 separate opponents is just like, it's just low, right? So the more competitive Commander gets, the more it becomes away from creatures. Being the Monarch incentivizes creatures because it can only be traded with combat damage. And then the third thing about the Monarch is that it has interesting interplay with what we would call kind of the arch enemy. The Monarch is not always the arch enemy. You do not always want to be the Monarch, because if I attack into the Monarch and I get the card, I now know I'm getting kind of the next attack. And so it is actually a lot of the time the right answer for the player who is ahead, even if they could roll over with some evasive creature and take Monarch, to actually split focus so that they are not drawing all of the aggro. And I think that on a strategic level is so interesting and really compelling, right? Because now you're forcing really interesting decisions for your opponents who are like, do I attack for the Monarch for material game piece advantage, or do I try and put the person who is clearly ahead behind, right? So I love that idea.
Yeah, and the social, there's also a social layer on top of it, right? Like there's this kind of like, oh, maybe I don't want to attack, you know, like, you know, if you attack someone, like, are you like, you know, burning bad goodwill and like causing like a strategic social problem. And if they are the monarch, it's kind of like, yeah, well, I had it coming, right? Like,
How would you implement it? Is it just somebody's like the player who goes last starts with the monarch or something?
I think going
Or would
last,
it be like on the first attack, the first player to take combat damage gives the monarch to the other, like the first player to deal combat damage becomes the monarch, basically?
oh man,
Those would be the two ways I would think about it.
off the top of my head, I think the right way to do it would be the last player to go gets the monarch, but only on the start of their turn. That way people aren't like racing to steal it away from them. Because like I would use it as like a balancing thing to kind of like, get that last mover a little bit of a comeback advantage, and I wouldn't want to give it to them at the start of the game, because then if somebody has haste and steals it, right, like you're just putting them further behind. You're painting a target.
I actually do think that you could just start the game with it. How often is there a 1/1, like a 1-mana haste? You know what I mean? Is that all that often?
So
I feel like almost.
I think if we were to implement it in our pod, it would work. But I think if it became an official rule, then all of a sudden one drops with haste, enter the get pulled into the meta, right? Like this warps the
But
meta.
like also, wouldn't that be kind of a good thing? I sort of love that, to be honest with you. I don't know. I would, if I was running Commander, I would really like game that out a little bit to see sort of what happens, because one of the things, this is why I like Yuriko. Yuriko is an aggressive deck in a format that is built for sort of like mid-range value decks, right? Like Yuriko is a deck that wants to land attackers and turn cardboard sideways, right? Which tends to be bad in Commander. And so having Monarch from turn like 0, like turn 1 or something, makes sense for that. But you can also do it on like I think the real question is if the player who goes last draws 3 extra cards because everybody is establishing ramping, nobody even has a little dinky creature, like
for turn 2, yeah, like
you know what I mean. Like let's say everybody does turn 1 land nothing, turn 2 mana rock nothing, turn 3 is when the first creature comes down, and that person is only getting it, like that's 3 cards that person just got themselves.
Right. Yeah. No. That's fair.
It would also maybe incentivize people to choose going last. One of the things I like right now about Commander is that you want to go first. There's no downside to going first. Just take it, go first, kind of thing.
I would need to sit down and think about like how to maybe you're right. Maybe it's kind of like first person to deal combat damage becomes the monarch, right? Like I think that's it. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
I also like the idea that I play a mana dork. I put Llanowar Elves down on turn 1, immediate threat. Everybody knows, right?
Yeah,
like,
no, and then you've got like an interesting decision. Do I swing with my Llanowar Elves or do I tap it for mana, right? Like
yeah, exactly. I love that. I think that's great. Or do I leave my Llanowar Elves up? Even when I become the monarch, do I leave my Llanowar Elves? Do I now need a blocker? Llanowar Elves, right? Like I think all of that makes for really interesting decision making. My favorite so I'm sorry, what do we say? Every Commander pod is 5 players, and they all play Star by default. And the Monarch. Were there any other solutions that you were thinking about?
I was wondering. I wanted to talk about like how you would do it in a group. Like I was thinking specifically about our pod, right? Like I think we all make decisions about what decks we play based on kind of the table state, right? Like I don't run Augustin that often because I know it is a deck designed just to make the game miserable, right? And so I only run it like once in a while because like, it's interesting, but it's also like mean, right? And similarly, you don't run Yuriko every game, even though it's probably your best deck. 1, for the variety, but 2, I also get the sense like you don't necessarily just like want to run over everybody, right? Like
that is absolutely true, right? Yes.
And so how would you solve this problem at like a pre-game like deck level, right? Like how
man.
Like how you have Yuriko, which is like I would say like a top tier deck in our pod. You've got Wing, which is or what is that the correct
Feather,
name?
Yeah, Feather.
Pretty
aggressive deck.
Yeah,
I mean, I have a bunch of different decks. I have a bunch of like slower planeswalker-y control decks. I something I was thinking about is viewing Commander a little bit from the perspective of game to game, sort of seasonal Commander, right? Like this is the meta progression thing I was sort of alluding to earlier. What does it look like? For instance, one thing that I always loved about Commander is the player that won the last game goes first or goes last, depending on if you want to punish them, right?
Yeah.
Something also, there are a million things you could do with something like this. So for instance, one of the things that I used to do when we were playing Super Smash Brothers and there was skill disparity, the player who wins the rest of the table, not the table, it was the couch, Super Smash Brothers, but would choose their next character. This was in college for me. I would win on Captain Falcon or Donkey Kong, and then they would make me play Yoshi because we were playing 64, and everybody thought Yoshi was the worst character. And I do sort of love the idea that if you win at Commander, everybody can make you sandbag by playing your dumbest deck, or like a deck that they know that they can counter, right? You know, you could then be like, I want you to play Yuriko, and I'm gonna play fucking Augustin, and just like make your life a living hell.
This is, you know, what's really funny is, so, I had something similar in college. This doesn't apply to you because you don't drink, but I was like, you know, drinking games are typically regressive, right? Like you lose harder. I was like, no, we're playing progressive drinking Smash. Every time you get a kill, you take a shot, right? And like that was a great way to level the playing field very quickly, right? Like it was also kind of dangerous. Yeah. So like I wouldn't recommend it for people at home. Like I was a stupid college kid. Don't hurt yourselves, please.
Every time you win a game of Commander, you inject heroin. Okay.
But you know, in terms of like you said a seasonal thing, the thing that popped into my head would be like, you know, what if like for a set we all bought precons and then like a booster box, and every time we played,
I love this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Every time somebody wins or maybe gets out first, you get like a booster. It's like you know, like a catch up and as a reward, right? Like the two middle players, you know, have to play with the precon until they win a game. I don't know if that's like the smartest thing, but like that's like I'd want to play around with that, right? Like, you know, kind of like doing like everybody gets a precon, and then you can build out with some booster stuff. Maybe you like start out with like a couple boosters or something like that.
Yeah, I have long wanted to do something along those lines. Like the Final Fantasy precon, brother. You know, the thing that I heard about was doing. It is everybody buys a precon, and then every time a set releases, you can. It's a couple of different versions of it. It's like every time a new set releases, you can buy $10 worth of singles, or you can buy 3 boosters, or you can buy, you know what I mean? Like you just get kind of incremental budget, and it filters stuff sort of over time. But I actually think that my favorite way of doing this would be something that incorporates some draft element. I like the idea of doing like a precon, and then you do like a normal limited draft, but you're drafting cards for your precon. So imagine we're playing Final Fantasy boosters or precons or whatever, right? And then we buy a booster box of Final Fantasy and do a round of drafting with that booster box. And now you have players who are, but you're not actually drafting to build a draft deck. You're just drafting to upgrade your current Final Fantasy deck, right? And then every new set comes out, you do another draft, you do another draft kind of thing. And I just think that would be my favorite version of it.
Yeah, no, I think you could do something like that.
The one thing about that though that you would have to do, and I would need to mention, is drafting is built around 8 players, and getting 8 people to sit down, I actually think there's a big social barrier to that, right?
Yeah,
it's like, now we need to get 8 of us on a weekend to sit down for a 3-hour draft or something, like Jesus.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd want to be it to be a little bit more limited, like. If we wanted to go with kind of like the winner gets a booster, maybe it's that after the game, you know, 2 boosters get drafted, like, you know, the pod sits down, the winner and the loser get to start, and then they pass, you know, you pass to the right, and then you keep passing to the right until the boosters are out, and I think that divides evenly into 4.
I think that would be great. We should do that.
Yeah.
Listen, we have the power in our hands. Okay,
yeah.
We can do whatever we fucking want and then report on it on the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I do also think though that, like, you know, I do want to play my nicely constructed decks, right? Like, you know, I went through my cards, I found some stuff that I want to swap into both my EC deck and maybe even into a couple other decks. So I was wondering if, like, I think maybe what you said is, like, you know, opponents pick the deck that you're playing, which, you know, again, it has to be with a casual play group, because otherwise, like, I only brought, you know, Yuriko and Augustin. Sorry, right? Like, which one do you want to play against, right? Like,
you could also do something like you keep a running tally of some kind. Let's assume the pod is, you know, you, me, Frank, Josh. We all start with our Final Fantasy precons that we're doing our upgrades with or whatever. The person who wins has to stick with their precon, right? But everybody else gets to change decks. And then you have this rolling thing of, well, now everybody is changing decks between games, but the person who wins is always sort of like, whatever, like kind of locked into whatever it is, and you can at least account for that. The danger there would be that Yuriko gets locked in or something, like a super high power deck gets immediately locked into the talk and wins 3 games in a row or something like that. But I do think that there's something to the idea that like you at least can predict what one other person on the table is doing and really work to counter that player.
I was gonna say, I think for our pod, I don't think there's any deck that's unbeatable, right? Like if Yuriko gets locked in fast, I run Augustin, and then. Actually, I think locking in Augustin would actually be bad. But I also Augustin usually doesn't.
No, but I also don't even think like Augustin is really good against Yuriko because Yuriko is built on casting lots of cheap spells. But like other decks, I actually think are
also Augustin. I have never won with Augustin, right? Like it, for its own reasons, it makes people target it, and it's not built to win, right? But
Josh could run Krenko. Yeah, I totally sort of feel that.
But I really love the idea. We could also do too is in the spirit of like the winner. Everybody else chooses their deck. It doesn't have to be one of their decks, right? Like everybody could bring their decks, and so you're incentivized to have like not like a terrible deck, right? Like, but like
but like forcing someone to sort of. I love that, like spot reading. I think that's super cool.
Like you have to run this pre-con go, right? Like, or something like that, right? Again, I think the part of the problem is that these only work in these kind of like, oh, we're friends. We know we're not going to like, put like, 40 cards of nothing and there's like the legendary from the new set that's like, a 0/8 like vanilla creature. That's like a legendary octopus. It's like, here, go have fun.
I'm a big fan of the idea of precons that have some really gated. I actually feel bad about this. I had a precon deck that I took apart, but I used to have one that I sleeved up just so that I could play at raw, power level 2 precon level. Right, this thing is a precon. It is only ever going to hit at a precon level. What do you do against that kind of thing? And I think the idea of having a precon where the only upgrades come outside of winning the games, I also really like the idea of drafting. I think drafting is really sweet.
Yeah.
Like the idea that you do a draft after each game and you get to throw cards into these precon decks. I think there's a lot there that would be fun to play out over the long term. Anyway, we talked about problem solving. What's next on the table? D&D?
Yeah, let's do D&D. Let's do
Okay, so the story here. On Monday, we started Heretic Heroes, which is the D&D game set in Ceran, which obviously has been like the focus of like the last 8,000 fucking podcasts. Okay, Heretic Heroes is set in the setup for Heretic Heroes, which you didn't know until you knew a little bit ahead of time. Generally, they are all in a prison, and when you are in this prison, your version of chain gang quarrying is going out into this desolate wasteland where there's a huge beam of light shooting up from the ground or falling down from the sky. It's not quite clear, I guess, technically. And killing ghosts. There are a lot of ghosts here, and you have to kill the ghosts. And you get equipped, you go out, you spend 8 hours killing ghosts, and then you come back. And so, the prisoners are sort of this last line of defense doing sort of whatever. Obviously, I talk a lot about these artifacts. I think artifacts are this great system. I love them. I think it's great. I feel like every D&D game, maybe not every D&D game, a lot of D&D games would benefit from the presence of artifacts. Artifacts are sweet. And I have this issue of they're in prison. How do I give my players incredibly impactful, important magic items without guards being like, you can't have that,
Yeah.
So anyway, I sort of already have a solution. I don't know that I would call it a solution. I actually know what I want to do. But you immediately, I laid out this problem to you, and you immediately like, oh, I know. I want to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've got a couple solutions, and like, I want to forewarn that like some of this is based on the specific plot of this game. So if you're looking to apply this in your home game, right, maybe it won't work as well. But there's like a couple different things you could do, right? Like there's the one that like I think popped in my head immediately is this kind of like Suicide Squad-esque thing, right? Like, for whatever reason, right? Like maybe there's finally a critical mass of non-Ellenweth supporters, and that's warping the magic or something. Or like, Ellenweth has decided, so as a player, I don't know how Ellenweth is the god that is the god of this region. It's the god that my character follows. But kind of like the core conceit that got laid out is that she is not the god of death. And while the rest of the world is kind of pantheistic and has the god of death handle the dead, this particular empire isn't. And so no one's handling their dead. And that's what's causing these problems. Right. And so we have all intuited that this has got something to do with, or rather it's explicit now with that. This is something to do with the set of problems. And you could just have it be like, like the equipment that they give us when we go out all implicitly has ghost touch, right? Like you could just say, these ghost touch runes aren't working anymore, right? Like, or something, or like it's only working in the hands of heretics because, it's no longer respecting Ellenweth specifically, right? And so they can give you, like, they will let you have this powerful equipment out in the field where you're fighting, but not back home. And you solve that by like, the weapons still work on you, right? Like they can still cut you down with like normal stuff. So it's not like you're in a position to say no, but like, that leads to something like, oh, at some point we've got leverage, right? We can say, oh, you don't let us back in with our stuff. We'll just die out. Like, we're going to die either way. We'll let you die with us, right? We're not going to go down like saving you from this thing that you can't defend against anymore. Jockey Chan Opera Singer says, I have a solution. It was in my prison pocket.
What do you okay, that's interesting. So the idea would be theoretically that as you guys are acquiring your artifacts are then held in the guardhouse, before you walk out into sort of into the wasteland to sort of fight stuff. That definitely makes a certain amount of sense. I actually already had considered something along these lines, specifically for the character of Svanko, played by Merle, who is a gunslinger. And he's a gunslinger with no guns. Because unfortunately, there's a couple of competing incentives here. He's a gunslinger with no guns, and so basically his class doesn't function correctly without guns. And I was like, do I give him the guns? And I essentially decided on sort of the simulationist answer, or not quite simulationist. It's a bit of sandbox, honestly. One of the things that's interesting about this game is that it has hardcore inertia to it, which I would call, if the players make no choices, they just stay in jail forever. Do you know what I mean? There is no story, there is no plot that is going to come break you guys out of this prison. I am not going to do that for yourselves. You have to figure it out, right? The idea is, you've been placed in this predicament, and it is up to you to solve the Rubik's Cube made manifest by the prison. And part of that means that your priorities are determined by you, right? It's not like I am going to tell you, oh, the plot shows up on the railroad and smacks you in the face, and now you get your items back or something. You have to sort of signal to me and one another, you know what? Our highest priority needs to be getting Svanko his gun back, getting Rusty getting Rusty his power armor, right? Like these are core aspects of their class features that they are not able to access, and so our priority is finding a way to get our stuff out of lockup. And once you have that sort of task in mind, now all of a sudden you can sort of chase down what that sort of looks like. But you can also come to a very different conclusion, which is something, like there's a bunch of different things to invest. There are a couple of buildings in the prison that you don't know what's in there. What's in there? That could be a goal. That's like that's a thing. And so part of this is about being able to set the proper, giving you guys the leverage to sort of set priority. Yeah, I don't know. That is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
do you know my like default is what I have sort of internally decided with myself what I want to do? Do you think you can guess?
I mean, if you're going with this pure like simulationist thing, it's like, well, if they never break out of prison, they never get them, fuck to you, right? Like,
It's not super wrong. I decided to myself, I was talking about this with Rachel, and I sort of decided to myself, listen, part of the nature of this game is about hiding items from guards. Do you know what I mean? Like I've been thinking a lot about what are some of the tropes that I want to hit on as a part of this, like as a part of this experience. What are some of the things that are in prison sort of breakout stories? There are a lot of these, the Great Escape. I don't know. There's a million. They're kind of like, yeah, Shawshank. They're kind of like negative. I almost think of them as like negative heist movies or like heist movies, but like inverted basically. Instead of you trying to get into a secret thing and get something out, you are the thing and you are trying to get yourself out thing. And I've just been thinking a lot about what like the tropes look like. What are some of the expected beats that we're going to hit on it. And I have planned for some of that stuff in my own brain. But one of the things that I said, I was like, if that's my mindset, then yeah, they can get artifacts, and then they have to figure out how to sneak that shit into the bunk, or even other stuff, right? Like you can imagine a version of things. I find a crazy powerful sword out in the desolate waste, and I leave it there. Instead of taking that sword and bringing it with me into the prison, I leave it where it is on the ground in Sector 9, and I come back to get it in Sector 9 because I know that, nobody else is going to find it or deal with it, or I don't know, like any of the other kinds of. Or you could imagine something a little bit different, like I'm making some sort of thievery check to smuggle this thing in, but then I'm going to leave it in a place of the prison that no one will ever find it. Like, I'm playing an aquatic elf and I have a swim speed and I can breathe underwater, so I go to the bottom of the lake and I drop it there and then I come back up, and like something like that wouldn't happen in our game because we aquatic elf with swim speed, but it's like that kind of stuff, right? Where it's like, where do you stash it? How do you hide it? All of that. So
yeah. Or like if the players decided they wanted to try and negotiate with the guard man, I don't have I left my notebook in your place, though I don't remember his name. It's like that,
I honestly also don't remember his name. Hezro, I think.
Yeah,
Courtmaster.
Like, it's like, maybe that's an option, right? It's like,
yep.
This is my thing. Me. Nobody else, like, for Svenko, right? Like, nobody else can use this, right? Like, nobody's capable of using this, and I'm effective with it. Let me just, like, bring it back out into the waste, right? Like, so I can help you, and, I'm at my top effectiveness, right? Like, just don't make this a problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the other side of this is that I am also, this is not something I was considering. For both Warriors of Krynn and 7th Expedition, those are pretty diverse travel experience kind of games. They're fighting a lot of different enemies. There's a lot of different stuff going on. They have a lot of agency to move all around the map. And that gave me a lot of leeway in terms of granting artifacts in one-off locations that are completely disparate from one another, right? There's a big bad guy. He shows up to the town. Johnny Big Sword kills him. He takes this artifact sword called the Giga Sword. Great, cool, awesome, right? That has nothing to do with any of the other stuff. It's just because this guy showed up to the town and did the thing, and the plot sort of hit him in the face. In 7th Expedition, all of those artifacts are just tied to, I don't even want to say there's spots on the map. It's a little more complicated than that, but I know where the artifacts are and how the players trigger them, and their approach to exploring the map and what they choose to prioritize, where they choose to go, how they choose to deal with, all that stuff determines when they find their artifacts, right? They are not going to get the artifact blank until they kill this person, whoever, and that person is only in this hex, and they don't go to that, and and they get to choose when they go to that hex. They're not going to get that artifact until they go there. Because this game is so centralized to the hub of the prison is also a pretty like isolated kind of place, and it's a pretty like it's an ice cream parlor with all vanilla. You know what I mean? It's like, what are my opportunities to give people really flavorful and unique artifacts that don't feel like they are all, well, this sun silver armor is from the Leonin of Ellenweth, because that's all they do here. They're fucking Leonin of Ellenweth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But yeah, what else? I mean, the other solutions I was thinking of were things like, make them not actually weapons, right? Like, like we are all theoretically representatives of different gods, right? Like you just like make them divine blessings, right? Like and that like solves the problem in a much
this is my other answer. I was thinking about bonus feats. The very first 1.0 version of not quite, sort of. The 1.0 version of this system were bonus feats that I gave you guys in Hell's Rebels based on side quests, right? Every character had their own chain of side quests to go down. When you completed your set of side quests, when you completed a side quest for yourself, you got an extra sort of like bonus feat, and I could just type it all back to bonus feats and go from there kind of thing. But I feel like that's a cop-out, honestly.
Yeah, no, I mean...
I don't have a better answer for that besides it feels fucking lame to take the easy answer.
Sure. No. But, like, in the spirit of, like, trying to solve the problem of how do you get this, like, custom-designed piece of extra power into the player's hands, but they're not supposed to have, worldly possessions. There's, that's...
I honestly, I feel that. It is the Gordian knot sort of solution. It's funny, in my work, man, do I want to tell the story? Remind me to tell you the story off the podcast, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes the easiest solution is the right solution. And then you can also mix them, right? Like, I don't think you can, like, it would be a little bit weird for, like, Svenko to manifest, like a ghostly spirit gun in his hands that he can fire with, right? But, like,
I have thought a lot about it. It's funny. I have put a lot of thought. I haven't written any of the artifacts, but I sort of know what I'm going to do for each of them, because there's just a lot of stuff that I think is cool about your guys' characters, and it's also Pathfinder gives you a lot of. There's a lot of texture to Pathfinder characters. I don't want to say in D&D I didn't have that texture, because I never really had trouble creating artifacts in D&D. But because Pathfinder is a crunchier system, there are more sort of mechanics that I get to sort of slither into and around in order to make a cool, interesting, and engaging kind of artifact.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, right? That, like, there's more knobs to turn, right? Like,
yes, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. So, yeah.
But those were two of my big ones. I had like a couple, I think, different variations on, like, there is a reason why the guards let you have your weapon, right? Like, which is, like, you're effective, you gain their trust, but, like, also a lot of these things could be solved through RPs, right? It's like, we're actually the baddest ghost slayers in the prison, and with that comes a measure of respect and leniency that, okay.
Yeah, I mean, RP is like an important. I do want to underline that, because it is an important thing. This is something I very explicitly designed the prison around, and it's very important to me about the Leyden themselves. They are lawful good. Okay, like, this is not it is authoritarian, it's fucked up, right? But they are lawful good. They are not assholes. You know what I mean? They're not, this is not, the I don't know, like the Empire from Star Wars or something. I don't know, it's like lawful evil sort of organization, right? And so that actually does give you a lot of common ground and an ability to kind of like make those kinds of appeals. Even something like the Gates of Light, which are sort of fucked up and horrible. I mean, I got the idea of Gates of Light came to me when I was listening to a podcast on the French Revolution about how we think of the guillotine as sort of I'm sorry, I need to explain this. Okay, backing up, for people who don't know, people who are not playing in this game, who are listening to the podcast, the Gates of Light are a thing that exists in the Leonin hierarchy, okay? So the Leonin, lawful good society, but very authoritarian. They have these gates that a cleric of Ellenwith can power, where they turn it on and it's a big sort of field of white inside of the gate, and they can push you through it. Like, you can walk through a gate of light. Some people can walk through the gate of light and they're perfectly fine, completely unharmed, right? Some people walk through the gate of light and they don't walk out the other side. It's like they walk into a portal, they die forever kind of thing. What I wanted to create a mechanism of sort of authoritarian execution, right? I wanted a guillotine, essentially. But I was like, how do I flavor this?
For people at home who don't know, France is a country, and they had this big revolution. And during the revolution, they executed a lot of high-profile people with this large blade that chopped their heads off. That's called a guillotine.
Yeah, I was just like, I want this place to have authoritarian vibes, but how do you make lawful good executioners, right? How do you have somebody who is lawful good put people in a guillotine, essentially? And so that's how I came up with this answer of it's a test of faith that it works sometimes it doesn't. There are underlying mechanics, you have to figure it out, kind of thing, right?
I was saying, like, our characters know, or my character specifically knows, that it's not as simple as the faithful, it's not like a true test of faith type thing, right? Like there's something else happening there.
But this is part of what I'm actually really enjoying about honestly both games right now, is all of the secrets that have yet to be unlocked and that you guys can unlock. Like Josh was going, I really want to compliment Josh, to be honest with you, because the thing of trying to figure out what I'm sorry, we were talking about something, you were talking about something, and then I was like, don't tell Josh, let him figure it out. And he did, essentially, that like the problem of the ghosts was happening because they don't worship Cyrexus. They don't worship the god of death here. And so their ghosts have nobody shepherding them. And so they're lingering behind. You're creating all of these spirits who are not properly sort of like put to rest. And Josh figured that out right in front of our eyes, which was like, what? That's like a uniquely D&D thing. I don't know that I've ever.
It took some prodding, but
that's true. Yeah, you got to ask the right questions. Okay, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff, right? Like, what's the nature of the beacon? Okay, why did they build this? Why did they build this rampart? All this other sort of stuff, and being able to thread that stuff in there is really sweet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm having a great time with the game. It's a lot of fun. Like all I think the characters are interacting well. It's a good time.
Too.
Yeah. But I think that was all my solution stuff, I think, for that. I didn't have anything in particular that was more deep than any of that. And I also think that it sounds like you have it on lockdown, right? It's kind of like let it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Let it
go. It's also
not
something that's going to trigger for quite a while. I mean, it depends on how quickly. Well, this is you are in the driver's seat of this sort of scenario, and so how fast you choose to do stuff and accomplish objectives is how fast you level up and how fast you start acquiring some of this stuff. But my plan is that, honestly, until you guys are level 2, I'm not even really gonna worry too much about at least the specifics, because I don't actually think you would get them until. In D&D, I also wait until level 2 to give everybody them, but I also like to level everybody out of 1 and 2 so fast. So
yeah, that makes sense. But did you? We're at the hour mark. We could switch over to weeks. But did you have a you said you had something for Warhammer 40K that you wanted to talk about?
I don't even know that I had. I just want to talk about it really bad.
I mean, it's part of your week, right?
Yeah.
So like,
I guess it's part of my week. Yeah. I played Warhammer 40K against Ceran. Okay, I won. All right, everybody, please clap. I was able to beat Ceran. I don't want to say I'm kicking myself, because that would be a bad way to sort of like frame it. But man, 40K is so perfect for sort of my brain. There's this thing of Ceran has this say dice tell stories, okay? And dice really told some stories yesterday. Not only because it's funny, we were playing 1,000-point game, which is theoretically supposed to go very fast, because there's just like not as much material on the board. You're not getting into these big dice. You're moving half as much stuff, you're shooting with half as much stuff, you're fighting with half as much stuff, kind of thing. But we were actually the people who were taking the longest to finish our game, and we never actually finished it, because we eventually just got to the point where it was 9:30 and already started, and we really just left. Yeah, I don't know. It was super fun. I had a great time. I love 40K. It was incredible. I don't know. What were, when you started like painting kind of your boys and we were kind of going down this path, what are your sort of expectations for how like a game of 40K is going to play your field? Do you have any of that kind of stuff in your head?
What do you? I'm not sure I quite follow exactly what you're asking. Is maybe
it's funny because really I'm sort of asking about like This is like a virginity question. What was it? What I just lost my 40K virginity, okay? And I'm just interested because it didn't match my expectations. And I just am interested, like, what expectations do you have? How do you think like it that will go? Are you just not even thinking about it in the
I'm not thinking
terms?
about it too much. I expect that my experience with the historical miniature stuff, at least, it's like got me prepared for like how dice tell stories is maybe the best way to put it, right?
True,
Like,
fair.
I know from the outside, right? Like, I was always like, how do you do, like, how do you play competitive Warhammer? There just seems to be so much variability in the dice, right? But like playing enough historical stuff has been, and I think historical stuff actually has a worse problem with numbers on the dice because you just don't get as many dice. Well, I just don't think you roll as many dice, right? Like, and it varies game to game. There's like 1,000 different systems,
and like
and part of it too is that, like, because historical games are focused more on being simulationist than they are on being like games primarily, they're okay with like less reliable dice because that's a more accurate reflection of like a firearms of like the early 20th century type deal, or whatever's in there.
Yeah, that part is real to me because I think part of it is I have maybe I would say a good conception of the math. This was something that was really pissing me off early in the game, but it ended up making me feel great later in the game. So pretty much always when I was rolling dice, because you are making all of these decisions that's like, okay, I am rolling 16d6 and I'm hitting on 3-ups, right? So what that means is I, immediately know that 12 of my dice should connect here, right? Because 16d6 3-ups is 4 out of 6 times, 66% of the time, and 66% of 16 is ish kind of 12 or whatever, right? I was making a lot of sort of snap probabilities like that in my brain. So for instance, this is the thing that really happened. I was rolling Feel No Pains, which is a roll against every point of damage. You can roll to not feel the pain, to not take that point of damage. So I was rolling so many Feel No Pains in the beginning of the match, and I was whiffing all of them. And I was like, hey, this is bullshit. 1 out of 6 times I'm supposed to hit this, and I just rolled 20 fucking dice and got nothing. You know what I mean? And like that really sucked. That was when it was like really working against kind of my favor and pissing me off kind of thing. But then later in the game, I was rolling so insanely hot with my Feel No Pains. And I would bet that if I were to math it out and I were to look at every single Feel No Pain roll, it probably did end up somewhere around that kind of 16%. But like over the course of the game where I rolled maybe 80 of them rather than the first 20 in the first turn and a half kind of thing, right? But it was really interesting to me, the contours of that kind of like probability and how mad I was sort of getting based on, kind of like based on those dice and seeing those things, especially because there was definitely math that I was not able to just kind of eyeball, which is just stuff around. Eventually you just get enough numbers that it's like, okay, well, I'm rolling dice to hit, and then any of my hits, I need to roll something to wound, but then also it's just like it adds enough variables that eventually just kind of becomes RNG. Weirdly, that stuff was also pretty fun, but just from like a send it perspective of just like I don't know, let's see what happens kind of thing.
I mean, there's not a lot of stuff that like affects your decisions, right? It's like like it, or it doesn't affect your decisions on kind of like I'm going to call it like a moment to moment level, right? Like it affects it in your army building phase and in your kind of like, maybe in some of your top level stuff, but like it's not like you're not going to shoot with all of your guns if you're in range, right? Like, maybe on the margin it affects, whether you move an extra 2 inches to try and get an extra 2 shots from somebody or something versus the exposure that puts you at. But it's most of the time you're rolling all of your dice anyway, and so like whether it's a 3 or a 4 up doesn't matter for you actively. That just matters to the outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the game itself, I felt like all of the important decisions that were made on the move. It was always about, okay, I move my guys here rather than moving my guys there. My game plan, and it's funny because my game plan was also wildly different than what I expected it to be, just because I didn't quite understand a couple of the rules, and so I kind of made weird choices about them. Basically, we sort of started in a little bit of like an L shape, so kind of like this, and this is where I put most of my boys, and this was sort of behind cover, and I wanted to split that big brick of mine up and have kind of half go around a big sort of terrain feature, but I wasn't really able to execute that because of the way that the terrain was set up and the sightlines were sort of working. And then I was intending to deep strike, I was intending to add my characters to the board in a pretty advantageous position, but Ceran beat me to it. He also chose that advantageous position to put his guys on the board, and I can't, deploy my whatever they were called, my 8-bound within 9 inches of his guys. So then all of a sudden I was like, well, I guess I'll deploy them on the complete opposite end of the board. And it was just like all of that stuff was what was driving our decision making. It was, okay, I'm moving this way. I'm staying tucked behind this piece of cover. I am choosing to go through the cover, enter into the cover, and then enter out of it. I ended up charging a pretty powerful sort of like piece of Ceran's line with a group that I had intended to send for his sort of commander, right? And just all of those decisions I think were made up basically on the movement level, not really on anything sort of from that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's interesting. Just as a callback, Jackie Chin Opera Singer in the chat says that Final Fantasy decks have already pre-sold or sold out on Amazon. So,
well, I hope you bought them. Okay, buddy. I hope you got each of them, because I'm not buying one.
Yeah,
you guys can all play Final Fantasy precons. I'll play some other precon.
I would say I've got a couple of unopened Outlaws of Thunder Junction. If you want to play, also not I don't know. I could talk about. Outlaws and Aether Drift are not my favorite sets from a theme perspective, right?
I don't know. We're in the back half. What are your perspectives on that?
Oh yeah, I just Outlaws. I like Karlov. I thought was mostly fine. It was a little weird with the detective stuff, but I thought it was mostly on brand. Outlaws was really kind of pushing it for me, right? It's kind of I guess, but you're putting people in cowboy hats that don't necessarily need to. It could work for some things, but and then Aether Drift is just it might as well. It's kind of like an other world set, but domestic, right? Inside of Magic, right? The people dressed up as race car drivers. It's not even they're trying, right? Murders at Karlov Manor. That's kind of fantasy adjacent. Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Kind of, right? The Cowboys thing is kind of there. It's pushing it a little bit. Race cars, it's nothing, right? I just don't like it, right? I think I'm actually excited for Tark here. I'm playing in, my in-office pool because that's a regular ass dragon set, right? I'm excited for a normal ass fucking set.
You know what's
you could not pay me to pay fucking Spider-Man. Maybe you could, but I'm not excited for Spider-Man.
I am thinking so much about that question. Where is the line? Where's the line? So, for instance, Kamigawa is samurai, but Magic the Gathering. Okay, I'm on board for that.
Well, so something I will say about Kamigawa is that it's a little bit weird, but it's also it's not putting Jace in a cowboy hat, right? Not that I know they necessarily did that with Jace, but all the Kamigawa characters are that's its own plane, right? It's something like that. So it's they're unique characters, and so they kind of live in that universe. I think it makes it easier. Sorry.
Well, I'm not even talking about the Neon Kamigawa, right? Future Kamigawa. I'm talking about original Kamigawa, right? I'm just trying to chart out a little bit, right? What would I say? So Kamigawa, this seems great. I totally get it. We are in Samurai, but Magic the Gathering. Okay, I get it. Then we have Bloomborough, which I also get. Little weird. No humans, all small animals, but Watership Down, Redfall, but Magic the Gathering. I can really see that. Outlaws of Thunder Junction and Aether Drift, I feel are swings, complete swing and a miss. You know what I mean? And it's funny because there's a really great comparison point, but we'll sort of get there. And I was just even thinking, I was like, what is the difference between Outlaws and Kamigawa? Because like those are theoretically pretty similar. It's not like, you know, the Western and Samurai famously have such a good overlap. They overlap so well. And I would consider Kamigawa to be a core, you know, just the heart of Magic the Gathering kind of set. If we're plotting out a big circle graph, right, and certain things are from the center, certain things are really, Kamigawa was very fucking close to that center because of how easy it is to get me on board for feudal Japan samurai as a sort of set that you want to kind of go with and play around. This is even outside of, you know, the idea of like the cyberpunk side of things. And I really don't know where that line, you know, like I just don't know why it hits different. Because it also hits different in the Universe Beyond stuff. I am probably gonna buy a Lord of the Rings deck. There's a deck that I think is really cool. It is Frodo and Sam and their hobbits, and Sam makes food, and Frodo carries the ring. And you know, I think it's sweet. I don't know what else to tell you. I think it's sweet. I think it looks good. I think it is fucking cool. Okay, that feels so different to me than Spider-Man. Or even, you know, than Final Fantasy, right? Final Fantasy is probably closer, right? But I just like, I can't see it. It doesn't even connect. And I was thinking about what are some other versions of this that I feel like I would be okay with. And the answer is there's actually probably quite a lot that I think I would be, you know, permissive of, because maybe
the Dungeons and Dragons set is technically like a halfway point of Universes Beyond, because like WotC owns them, right? But
yeah, exactly. I could 1000% see myself dropping an ancient black dragon on the battlefield and doing, I don't know, whatever that shit does. I think those sets are not great just like on a mechanics level. Like I think Venture into the Dungeon is a dog shit mechanic. I don't like rolling d20s. I think that's a pretty dog shit mechanic, right? But like Lord of the Rings is the good version of this. Lord of the Rings, I think, is a well-designed set, generally speaking. I mean, I haven't really played with any of these cards, so take it with a grain of salt. But just like on an eyeball level, I like the Lord of the Rings mechanics. It's tapping into stuff that makes a lot of sense. It sort of like works for me. I feel like you could pitch me on a dozen different sort of what are some versions of a universe that I personally like and am connected to and enjoy and would love to see represented in a Magic card. Yeah, I would probably buy the Game of Thrones set or the Warhammer Fantasy set because I care a lot about, you know, like those planes of existence, right? But I don't know. You just kind of can't get me on board for Spider-Man. Even Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think, is too far for me, to be honest with you.
You just hate anime? Is that it, buddy?
Yeah, I do hate. Yeah. The hardest anime known to man, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Are we once again towing towards the best option beyond, aka Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think I think part of it is the art style. Like I think that is actually a big part of it, right? Like part of my pushback against Thunder Junction is that a lot of it is like not taking itself seriously, it feels like, right? Like, you know, like, isn't it weird to see these guys in cowboy hats? And I think it's better than Aether Drift, which is why I'm better with Outlaws. I think part of it too is that like in their zeal to like make things more collectible is like I have hold up, I'm gonna run away from the mic for a second to go grab this card.
Okay, I'm just gonna to respond to chat for a second. So Frank, my good friend Frank, says Avatar: The Last Airbender works so well with the established game elements. I actually do think that this is fair, and it will probably be about the design. I think that's actually probably the big deciding factor for me when it came to Lord of the Rings. And you know, D&D I was willing to sort of just kind of accept, but I just didn't like the design of a lot of cards, so I just kind of went, who cares? You know, like, sure, they did Universes Beyond, but it's a bad set. I don't even care about bad sets in the first place. Lord of the Rings looks cool, and there are cards in there that I want to play with archetypes that I think are neat, right? And I feel like you could probably sell me on Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, the idea of playing, I don't even know how I would design this, but like, I really like Earthbenders. I think Earthbenders are sweet. They are my favorite sort of like type of bender. And so in a version of things where I could play King Boomy, and King Boomy has some weird rule that is about Oh my god. You do King Boomy and it would be toughness matters. It would say creatures assign their attack based on their toughness, right? Which is very earthbender thing, you know, kind of defensive and hardy, but it's also a King Boomy thing because he's all about, you know, things are not what they seem. So it seems as though this thing has very low attack, but it's actually a 0/8 and it, you know, beats your face in because King Boomy flashes onto the field or something like that. Like, okay, now you can get me on board. It's like a well-designed set I could probably sway me on stuff. But like, there's no version. If they did, like, I don't think there's any version of the Spider-Man set that attracts me. And I love Spider-Man. I would go hard for Spider-Man as a whatever. Like, I like Spider-Man. I like Spider-Man games. I've read a million Spider-Man comics. All the rest of it, right? But you just can't convince me that playing Dr. Octopus is going to be a satisfying experience. I just don't think that that's like, I don't know. That's just like not going to end up being possible.
All right. To kind of get back to what I was talking about.
Sure.
I have a couple of these here. This is like the art from, this is like the wanted poster art.
Right. Yes.
For Outlaws. I've got a couple of these, and I think the murder one's actually pretty all right. I also have a decisive 9. These are the ones that I knew I had out so I could pick them up. These kind of push the boundary for me. I don't have any of them, but the special art for Aether Drift is like drawn by the Ren and Stimpy guy and like totally takes me out of it, right? Like I hate those things.
Yeah.
And that's not to like, you know, dump on the artist, right? Like that's just kind of like, you know, not the thing I want in my Magic the Gathering. And I think that's part of why Kamigawa and even Neon Dynasty works, because they look like Magic cards, right? Like, and yeah. I think that's a big part of the problem, is that in their efforts to like make more collectible and sellable product, they have started like pushing the art in a way that's away from kind of like the core Magic feeling. And I think this is also part of why these like, you know, some of these universes beyond, like, it would be weird to draw like the Final Fantasy characters in a normal Magic style, right? Like I kind of want them to look like anime characters, because like, you know,
otherwise, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
what's the point?
Yeah, but at that point, you've hit the critical divorce point, right? Like, you know, like similar. Like, I honestly think that like there was like a DC comic where like it's like Knights of the Round Table, right? Like, I think you could probably do that as like a secret lair or something, right? And have it work,
for sure,
right? But like, you couldn't do DC comics, right? That's the is the car a Magic card? There is a Magic card. What?
The card from Final Fantasy 15? I think that's what.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it's probably a vehicle, right? Like Aether Drift.
It's probably a vehicle.
Like,
yeah,
there are cars in Aether Drift, right? Like, you know, that's like the whole set, right? Like,
yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I'm kind of plotting a graph in my mind. One aspect of the graph is how well designed. I guess this way. How well designed is the set, right? Lord of the Rings, very well designed. Baldur's Gate, not as well designed. I like that. That helps me kind of gauge how. And then part of it is how much I like the other stuff, right? So, for instance, I don't like Final Fantasy, so it's down here. I haven't played a lot of Final Fantasy games. I'm not connected to it. I don't give a fuck about Mughals or whatever. But I know that there are a lot of people who love a chocobo. They're like, oh my God, a chocobo. This is the greatest thing. Like, cool. Totally get it, right? Like, that's for a different kind of person. Absolutely am there. There is stuff that I care a lot about, which would be like Warhammer. If they did Warhammer Fantasy, I would buy fucking everything because I really love that setting and I know all of the characters, and you betcha I want to summon the Electric Counts with Karl fucking Franz. That sounds amazing, right? Like, you would absolutely like get me on board for something kind of along those. And I'm trying to think of like, what is the furthest from sort of the default Magic fantasy? What is the furthest thing out from that radial graph I was describing that you would probably get me to buy Magic cards for? And there is an answer. There really is one. And I think it's Fast and Furious.
I was gonna say,
I think you would get me to buy the Fast and Furious card. Like, if, man, are you kidding me? I can play Han.
Like, I honestly think the Fast and Furious set would work better than the Aether Drift set, because it's not like putting Jace in a race car, right? Chandra in a race car, right? Like, it is, Dom is, human, race car driver or whatever, right? Like, and
I also just think the framing on the race car set is stupid. The thing that I think would have made Aether Drift work better is if this is, by the way, the thing that I think sets Kamigawa Neon Dynasty apart. The main character of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is Kaito, this ninja planeswalker. We'd never met him before, right? But we had a pretty good introduction to him. He is doing a thing that's very, very classic Magic, ninjutsu. Everybody loves the ninjutsu mechanic. It's a huge fan favorite. They hadn't touched it in 20 fucking years, and they came back to it for sort of Neon Dynasty. I think that's why Neon Dynasty, even though it's so far fantasy stuff, right, totally worked, because they introduced a new planeswalker who was super deep into the core of that setting, and had a really, really, really good tie back to an important part of the original setting, which was the most beloved mechanic in it, ninjutsu, right? If Aether Drift had something like that,
like it was its own plane, right? Like it was like the Thousand Needles, right? In WoW, right?
I mean,
before it flooded, like, right? But when they had the racetrack,
right? That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, like, if you did Aether Drift did this weird thing where it was going between 3 different planes, which I think is sort of stupid. If they had just kept it to Kaladesh or Amonkhet, the 2 planes that people had been to, and it wasn't about Chandra and Jace, like the main character of Aether Drift was so clearly Chandra, but like Chandra has never fucking ridden a motorcycle. It's not like that's like part of her thing, but like maybe you could have convinced me that like Tezzeret or something, like Tezzeret is a core Magic the Gathering character. He's been really important to the lore. I think a lot of people would sort of recognize him in his weird fucked up arm, and he is an artifact guy. And maybe you do Tezzeret designs a car and drives around in it, and that's kind of like this set. I feel like maybe you could get away with that if I were redesigning Aether. But I just think there were so many ancillary decisions that were sort of like about the set. Splitting it between the individual planes, terrible idea, right? Just the design of a lot of these cars, I just think were pretty bad. And the sort of the Hearth certification of it, I just feel like is really antithetical.
I think you could even made it worked a little bit better if they like looked more like, self-propelled magical carriages than race cars, right? Like you were just talking about the Warhammer Fantasy thing, right? I bet you wouldn't buy any of it if the way it happened was like, this is a Warhammer Fantasy Funko Pop crossover card set, and all the art was like, chibi Warhammer players or Warhammer characters.
Or
right?
if it was establishing that Warhammer Fantasy was a Magic the Gathering that was being visited by fan favorite character Jace and Nissa. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yes, I would be mad about that. I don't want to see Sorin Markov, meet Vlad von Karstein. They are 2 different, I want to play Vlad von Karstein. I think it's sweet that Vlad von Karstein, super famous vampire lord in Warhammer Fantasy lore, is a character that I can build a vampire tribal deck around. But like, don't try and, you know what I mean? Like trying to shoehorn in sort of like the Magic side would definitely like make it not work. I do think Fast and Furious would work, which is so weird. It's so weird to say that out loud, to be honest.
I mean,
but
it would work because it would work if because it's real people, like that. Real people translate well to the art style, right? Like Ian Malcolm looks like a Magic card, even though he's like, it's very clearly, why can't I remember the actor's name? Jeff Goldblum, right? Like
Jeff Goldblum. Yeah.
Like he looks like, it works as a Magic card, right? Like whereas if you try to, the SpongeBob card, I think the SpongeBob cards are okay because it's a secret lair. I have a lot more tolerance for secret lairs, but like
I also have a lot more tolerance for skins. The SpongeBob cards are not new cards; they are SpongeBob art on cards that already exist, which is fine. I'm not gonna get mad.
Yeah. That is what I meant primarily by secret lairs, even though it's like I mean, I'm also okay with like the secret lairs being a little bit off, right? Like I kind of want to play a Deadpool deck, right? But like
Oh man, geez, I actually think Deadpool is a really good card if you build the deck right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this honestly. I feel like it would be, I think it would be the least fun deck to ever play against ever. But you just turn off, you blink him a bunch of times, you bounce him a million times and blink him, and he gets that ETB, and you just turn all of your opponent's creatures into tie bombs.
You know what the great thing is? It's not an ETB. It's like because of the phrasing on the card, as it's coming in, you don't have to like. They have to counter it. They don't know what you're targeting before like it comes in. Like this is like the way the rules work out. Like you either have to count like the way he enters is he hits the board, and if he hits the board, it swaps, but you don't have to make the decision until he actually hits the board.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah. No, it's like there's like 1,000.
Actually, even worse. Yeah.
There's like 1,000 videos on YouTube about how like actually it is like impossible. Like Deadpool is very good because he's impossible to actually react to. Right, like you, like if he's coming in, you don't like he could be swapping your opponent, or he could be swapping, with you, but you don't know that. You just kind of have to like counter on blind faith, or like do table politics, right? Which makes some amount of sense. And it's also
I was just thinking about like blinking him 1,000 times. You shut all of your opponent's creatures off. Your opponent plays your commander, nothing. It is now a time bomb that is hurting you every turn. Like that would be the most annoying thing. Work,
yeah,
right. Just like targeting Yuriko, and now Yuriko is sitting there as a fucking 1/3 with nothing. It's just like kill me.
Yeah, no. I think it'd be fun, but I don't. It's. I also didn't jump on that. I'm not paying for that, so maybe I'll proxy one or something.
Yeah. I totally get that. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because superheroes seems like it would be more, but there's something just so off to me about superheroes. And I do think that there is something off to me about Fast and Furious. The thing that's off to me about Fast and Furious that I would get rid of, or that I would be mad about, is if they were like a 1967 Dodge Charger is a card, and it's called 1967. It's like I think if you do Dominic's Charger and it is his Dodge Charger, we all know what it is. Okay, you got like that's fine. You kind of got me there. But because it is specifically like the more references you kind of make to like the world, the worse it sort of gets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Though also, if there is a land that is up like a plains, and it's the house, and it's looking at Los Angeles, I would buy so many copies and cry. Okay. It's a land called the Fast and Furious House. And you know what it does? It taps to give you a food token. And that ability is called the Family Barbecue. I want to design this whole set now. Like, I feel like I would love it.
Oh, man. Tap, create 2 mana, uses mana to only pay for family or something like that.
Yeah,
cards that
there's an
share
enchantment card, and you know what it's called? You know what it's called?
What
Race Wars.
Oh, what is
the Corona card?
What
I don't even know what the funny thing is. They did Fallout too. Fallout actually weirdly doesn't seem to me. It's very fantastical, I guess. They had rad counters for Fallout. So like I wonder, like if I were doing a specific mechanic for Fast and Furious, what would I do? I don't know.
I mean, the easy one is you take start your engines from Aether Drift.
Yeah. Aether Drift. What a mistake. What a mistake of a set.
Yeah. But I think Start Your Engines also has some interesting like as a mechanic. I wish it wasn't called Start Your Engines because it locks it too much to the to the setting. But I think it's like Monarch has some like interesting effects on how the game is played, and so I'd like to see it come back as like a non-racing themed effect.
Yeah, I like the idea of like speed, right? Like, oh yeah, sure, I'm gonna reach max speed, but like Start Your Engines is such a sort of the connotation of it is so locked versus speed. You could, for instance, you could imagine we do Tournaments of Eldraine, and it is a jousting set. It's all about jousting as a mechanic, and they have, you know, jousting is, they're mounted and they go really fast, and you have speed as a part of this whole sort of whatever process thing. It's like, you can sell me on that, but you could never put start your engines on those cards, because a fucking horse that you're jousting into battle does not have a not have a card.
I mean,
you know?
even the feeling of it is kind of like, you know, continual build. So you can call it like onslaught or inertia or something like that, right? Like, and have it work. It doesn't need to be speed, right? Like, it's like, this is this counter that ticks up when you when you hit your opponent, right? And then at max speed, a bunch of cards have a different effect, right? Like, it's an interesting way to cost things. And so I think it's an interesting mechanic, but I don't like it's flavored wrong, like we said. What else? The only other thing I wanted to talk about was I've been playing a bunch of Blueprints, which is this fun little indie game that you know, has been getting a lot of reviews. Everybody in like the games press, or at least a lot of the games press, is like, this is like the greatest game of the year already. And like, it's a fun game, but it is not that great. Like, it doesn't have the like narrative gameplay, like the Ludo narrative integration that I think makes for a truly type of one of these games, right? Like Papers, Please, or Return of the Obra Dinn, or even like Disco Elysium, right? Like, these all have like really great ways to tie the gameplay into the narrative, and I just don't think Blueprints hits that. It's that high. It also like has some rough edges on like you were really at the mercy of RNG in the game, and it's a cool and unique game, but it is not so crazy that I'm you know, I'm going nuts for it. It's fun and I'm playing it, but I'm already at the point where it's kind of like, I am playing this to finish out the things I need to finish out, and that's basically it. I'm not gonna like stick around for a whole long on this.
I've not touched it, but I do think this period in time is sort of a hotspot for, like, Cryptmaster was last year, was also in this time. 3 weeks from now is when Cryptmaster came out in May of last year, and I just sort of think that like there's this thing that happens where there are big games that come out kind of in Q1, and then kind of Q2 is a little bit of a dead zone. And so what I think sort of happens, you get a bunch of people coming off of like Assassin's Creed, this year example, and they're just like looking for something to like a palate cleanser indie. And my feeling is that Blueprints is what hit that. There's a couple of other ones like South of Midnight. I don't know, some other ones, right?
I would say like, my big high point for the quarter, I think, is going to be Expedition 33. It's like some French name is like the second. It's another one of these Xbox Game Pass games, but it's like a French JRPG, which I know is like a contradiction of terms, but like, but it looks really good, right? And like, you know, it looks like a classic game. So, what is the subtitle? And then I assume you're looking at it right now.
Clair Obscure.
Yeah, Clair Obscura, right? Clair Obscura is apparently very French, in a way that, like, you know, like, it has like the francophones being like, ha ha ha, this is neat. But
Clair Obscure.
Yeah. But I'm looking forward to that. Like, this is actually like the year I think that Game Pass like really sells its value to me, because like I've been you know, I have Blueprints on Game Pass. I played Avowed on Game Pass. I've been enjoying. I'm gonna play Expedition 33.
You ever beat Avowed? How far did you go for Avowed?
I haven't played it since we talked about it last on the podcast.
Honestly, I want to go. I had that weird issue with save. Oh god, I had that weird issue with my save, and I never went back to it. But I actually really do. I was having such a good time with it. And then it's a wild how much that one save issue completely soured me on the whole thing, and it had nothing to do with the game. It was just like, annoying.
Frankly, I just didn't enjoy it as much. Bless you. Enjoyed as much.
Oh,
as
I didn't actually fucking mute myself.
I wasn't enjoying it as much as Monster Hunter Wilds, which is the game that I ended up playing, and I've only recently kind of fallen off of that, and I might go back to it. But you know, I want to go finish Disco Elysium. I want to go play Death Stranding 1 and finish it before Death Stranding 2 comes out. The other big thing is that we got a big preview for Bungie's marathon. I signed up for the alpha. Hopefully I'll get into that. If not, that's fine too. It's a closed alpha, so it's not even like I could talk about it here if I wanted to. But I'm looking. That's coming out in September. I've basically been like doing that thing I do where I go on an insane lore dive into Marathon lore. I had ChatGPT go do like this new deep research thing. I'm like, go write me a plot, a lore synopsis of Marathon, and it did, which is kind of funny because like the core theme, the core plot of Marathon is like a bunch of AIs go rampant, which is like they kind of well, yeah, like they established sentience. They're like the main one is Durandal, and he's like in charge of like opening doors on the Marathon, and he's kind of like goes nuts, and like that's like the plot of like the 3 original Marathon games. And then what's it called? And then I also I haven't listened to it yet, but like no, Google has this product called Notebook LM. I'm an employee of Google. This is not an official thing for them or anything. But I like fed a bunch of like or Marathon lore links into Notebook LM, and I had it generate a podcast for me on the Marathon lore. So I have yet to listen to it, but that's
whoop.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I do want to say they did not, in fact, name an AI Durandal. It is Durandal, right?
Yeah,
like
Durandal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's like it's a thing. It's like a Final Fantasy boss also as well, which I only know because there was in fact a Final Fantasy 14 server that was the Durandal server.
Yeah, I mean it's probably like a reference to something, right? Like the other AIs are like Tycho and Leela, and there's one called like Thoth. From like the later games, but
yep,
it's wild, right? Like has starts actually back in Bungie's like first real game, which is Pathways into Darkness, which means that like Bill Clinton is canon in the Marathon universe. But that's one of these things where like you can go down a rabbit hole. I would highly recommend if you're interested in like learning the basic stuff, go watch Mandalore Gaming has a series of videos on Marathon games, and even some of the tie-in stuff from Pathways into Darkness, and even this other game called like Forsaken, which is not really tied in that much, but I think they're all worth a watch. I'll try and remember to link them down in the description. But yeah, that's been most of my week. You have anything else for your week you want to talk about?
I don't know. I guess not. I just want to warn my players who are about to play in 7th Expedition. I made a real fucked up monster for you guys, okay? I've actually been waiting to use this one for a while, and I had the lore of it. I've had the lore of it for a long time, but I never actually statted it out. I was like, here's what happened. We'll talk a little bit about 7th Expedition. So right now, they found a village, a Nakatl village, these cat people, kind of like jaguar people. And they didn't have the right boat to go to the Nakatl. So they had their river boat, but not their sailing boat, their sea boat. So they went, and the village was on an island. So they went all the way upriver, and then all the way downriver to go get their sailing boat again, and then sailed all the way around the edge of the continent and explored a bunch of hexes that they hadn't previously touched on. And as they're going back to this Nakatl, to this Nakatl island, basically, they killed Kazrak, one of the warbands. So there was the very first warband they ever interacted with, Kazrak One Eye, and they tracked him down and killed him, butchered him, killed him. And they also were just sort of scouting around to try and find the other Beastman warbands, and they rolled something on the tension pool that spawns a warband, and it happened to spawn the warband right next to them, in the hex next to them. And they also happen to be scouting, which is revealing what if there's a warband inside of the adjacent sort of hexes. So they immediately found this warband. And it's the first time they've ever spawned a new warband. Technically, they've actually spawned a couple of others. And so then they were just like, you know what? I'm gonna go kill this shit out of this. I'm gonna go kill the shit out of this thing. And it's cool. This one is neat. I didn't actually think we would get this far, but we got there.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah. Last thing I'm gonna say is this is a weird thing, but I had a stray thought today. So people at home probably don't know this. I am on a GLP-1 agonist for weight management purposes. It's called Wegovy. But I learned today that the way they developed it, it's also used for diabetes, sugar, blood sugar stuff. It's called Ozempic in that form. They developed it by basically Gila monsters have this like weird property that when they only like eat like 3 times a year or something like that. And so scientists were like, I wonder why they do that. And they like examined its like spit, and that's where like these drugs come from. And so it's like if you think about it, it's like I am, basically we have like a weight loss potion made from Gila monster spit. And like, it's obviously a lot more complicated than that, but like, it's like, reality is awesome, right? Like, like
that is awesome. Who doesn't love a little fucking alchemy in motion?
Right?
That sounds like a witch's cauldron.
Exactly, right? Like
Speech of the Gila monster.
You desire beauty.
Yes, that's what it is. Oh my god. That's amazing.
But yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to say. Just kind of like it's, science is cool. But with that, I guess I'll say, what's it? If you'd like to email us about any of the stuff we talked about on this podcast, email us at derpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsplaygames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/derpsplaygames or youtube.com/@derpsplaygames. So these go out live. Rate, review us on iTunes, YouTube, wherever. That's everything I have. Buddy, do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
Repose is out. Repose came out on Monday. Play it. Very cool. Much smaller game than we normally publish, but just insanely, honestly, pretty cool. Very atmospheric. Highly recommend. One of my own games. Go play it. Leave a review. Okay. There you go.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.